So my name is Gyapay, and I'm a Master of Science student in Public Health at the University of Waterloo. So as a Master of Science student, I do research. And so when I say research, people often think of someone in a lab working with chemicals and test tubes, and that's definitely one type of research, but I'm here to tell you that there's many more. So as a Master of Science student in Public Health, I don't work in a clinic and I don't work in a hospital, so I work in communities with people. And my research focuses on looking at connections between the environment and health. So I'm really interested in understanding connections between climate change and impacts on northern food systems here in the Northwest Territories. So in terms of what research looks like, there's a lot of confusion around what do researchers actually do and what do scientists do. So what I do is I collaborate with scientists from across Canada. So I'm always working as part of a larger team with other scientists as well as community members. So people in communities as well as territorial and regional governments here in the Northwest Territories. So the type of research that I do is really driven by community interests and what communities are interested in understanding. And so we develop questions together to be able to answer some of these questions that communities have about their foods and about what foods are healthy and how to adapt to impacts of climate change on their food systems. So that's the most fun, but also the hardest part about research is developing really good questions to be able to answer some of these issues. So we develop these questions and then we collect data. So data is essentially information to be able to answer some of these questions and issues that communities might have. So that involves measuring things, collecting samples, and also talking to people. So a lot of my work is doing this, so asking people questions and listening to their answers. And I find that a lot of fun. I really enjoy hearing people's stories and hearing people's experiences and their understandings of these topics and their lived experiences. So once we have all this information and all this data, I use certain methods to be able to analyze it. So to make sense of what does this information mean and how can it be applied. So then once this data is analyzed, I'm able to make recommendations, because that's the whole purpose of science, is really to inform decision making and to improve different policies or different decisions that are made to improve our knowledge and to improve ultimately our health. So that's a little snapshot of what a scientist does, but I guess one of the things that on a day-to-day basis, I do a lot of reading, and then I do more reading, and then I do even more reading, and then I do some writing. So a lot of my work involves reading up on what people have done previously in my field, what have people done, what are the gaps in our knowledge, and then where do I fit in and how can I contribute to this field and to this subject. So then I do writing, and often so as a researcher, I'm also an author, so I do a lot of writing to be able to share my findings, which is usually in scholarly articles, but that can also be in poster format and doing oral presentations and talks. So to be able to share my knowledge with others. And so prior to COVID, I was doing a lot of traveling and attending conferences, and that's a really fun way to be able to learn about all the newest information on a certain topic with other scientists from both across Canada and around the world. So I really love that, and that's a really fun part of research, is to be able to understand who's doing what and areas where we can collaborate to be able to work together. And also because of COVID, I'm now doing a lot of meetings because it's important to stay connected with my teammates, and so I'm also a professional Zoomer. So yeah, that's a lot of fun too. Like even before I started doing research, I didn't understand what research was. Like I said, I always imagined it, and I did this type of research as well, like working in a lab and working with chemicals, and that's a really important type of research, but there's so many other types, and pretty much I think the biggest takeaway is if there's anything that someone is interested in, there's someone doing research on it. So it's such a broad field, and it can really be on anything. So I've always loved asking questions and trying to answer questions. But I never, like as a kid, I didn't know what research was, or I didn't say, I want to be a researcher. That wasn't something that I discovered until university. I knew that it was something that people did, but I didn't think that that was an option even as a career. It wasn't something that I was told that you can go into research. And so I've always been really curious and have loved science, and have always been really interested in having, learning more and continuing to teach myself more. But it really wasn't until university that I started learning what research is, and then really getting involved in different research projects, designing my own research studies, and participating in other people's research projects that really sparked my interest in getting more involved in research and also pursuing research as a career. In terms of the topic, so specifically around like climate change and nutrition and northern food systems and indigenous communities, I've always loved nature and being outside, and really developing connections with people and understanding people and health. So it's always been something that I've been passionate about, but it really wasn't until high school that I started participating in on-the-land camps. So for example, like the Tundra Science Camp, and really like other amazing programs through school that I was able to spend time outside. And that's when I was really learning about climate change and impacts of climate change on the Northwest Territories and on ecosystems, especially on plants and animals. And I became more interested in understanding how climate change is impacting not only northern ecosystems, but also health. But at that time, I really didn't understand that I could study both at the same time through research, and I thought that I had to pick one over the other. So I knew I loved environmental studies, but I also loved health and human health and nutrition. So I studied biology at university, and I loved it, but I was also really missing that piece of understanding health and human health. And so at that time I realized, okay, I really love like ecology and learning about plants and animals and biology as a whole, but I really wanted to incorporate that health lens as well. So I transferred into a health studies program and finished a degree in biomedical studies. And through this program, it really opened my eyes to a whole other world that essentially recognizes that health is holistic. So it's not only physical health, but that also includes environmental health and cultural and mental health as well. And so that's when I became really interested in this topic. And through assignments and through my coursework, I started learning specifically about my field of research, and just read a lot, continued to read a lot of articles and learn about who's doing research in this field and who's out there in Canada and internationally, and tried to think about this topic from all kinds of different lenses based on the courses that I was taking. So for example, like from a geography perspective, or an ethics and law, or a nutrition perspective, or like more of a science, chemistry and perspective. So it was really fun to be able to explore this topic and learn more about it through my coursework. And then I realized that I was really passionate about the Northwest Territories. So growing up here, that's always been a really important piece of inspiring, my interests and what I'm interested about, and having that lived experience and the connections to communities and understanding some of these realities of food and access to food and impacts of climate change. And so all of these factors combined, so based on my lived experience and interests, as well as through my courses and my studies, really inspired me to continue working in this field and to pursue research, which I'm really happy to say I'm currently doing. And it's fun, and it's really exciting to be working with scientists who were authors in some of these papers that I was reading, when I was starting out my studies. So it's really fun and exciting to be able to work with them and to be contributing to this, to this field of knowledge. That's the biggest takeaway, is that I always thought that for a career or for even studies at school or anything that people choose, whether or not it doesn't have to be at university, any field, that it's really focusing on one thing. But the biggest takeaway is that through research you can really study as many things as you want and look at things from all different perspectives. So every day I'm thinking not only about environmental sciences, but also about public health and history and law and policy, and thinking about ecology and toxicology. And so it's really fun that I'm able to always draw in these different sources of knowledge and think about things from so many different perspectives, and that I'm not just working in one field on one thing, and that it's really broad and diverse. Yeah, my favorite thing is that I'm able to ask questions and be able to answer some of these questions that I have. And what makes it so much fun and really rewarding and meaningful is that when I'm asking these questions and answering these questions, I'm collaborating with communities. And that's the most important part of research, is that it's creating meaningful change in a respectful and collaborative way. And so everything that I do and all the research that I do is really driven by community needs, and it's led by communities, so that it's responding to their needs, and so that it's making positive change and building on strengths that communities already have. Because there's a lot of really good work that's already being done, but there's also lots that can be improved as well. So that's what I have so much fun with, is really working with people and being able to improve certain problems or certain issues together, and working together to be able to collaborate on some of these topics. Yeah, I would say the fun thing about working with other scientists and traveling is that there's a lot of logistics and planning that go behind research and trips. And I think that's especially with my work with traveling, there's always unexpected things that happen, things that get in the way of our plans, and no matter how much we plan, sometimes things don't go exactly according to what we had hoped. So I don't have any, I'm trying to think of, so I was in Tuktoyaktuk in late January, early February. So we were visiting the community to be able to, we were working on another study that I'm helping out with. It's just funny because through travel and weather and delays and planning certain, what we're going to do in the community, there's always fun things that come up, and little, just fun adventures and things that, often don't go, they kind of aren't obvious in research, and it's just fun little things that, going over to someone's house for tea and just chatting with people, or for example, we were out out in the community and did a community potluck and feast at the community hall, and so it's just it's just fun, stories like that of collaborating with in the community and working with people and hearing their stories. Yeah, I think that's the best part. It's maybe not so glamorous, but to me it's the most exciting part, is just really talking to people and hearing their stories. Yeah, so one of my favorite books that I would recommend is actually by a local author, so Nicole Redvers, so The Science of the Sacred by Nicole Redvers. And this is a really amazing book to understand both Indigenous and Western science, and to understand how we can learn about the histories, as well as utilize the benefits of both traditional Indigenous and also Western sciences. And that really matches well with my research and what I do, because I'm thinking in both of these worlds, so using the benefits of Western science as well as Indigenous knowledge to be able to work on some of these issues. So that's a really great book, and it's written really well that anyone can understand. You don't have to have a background or knowledge in science at all to be able to understand it. So I really enjoyed it, and it's definitely a really great read just to understand about thinking about science in general and what is science and different perspectives around the world as to how people approach science and how science is done. So that's a really good one. So there's a book that actually, I know you're interviewing Bruce Green, so he gave me a book when I was just starting out as an undergraduate student, and it's called Letters to a Young Scientist by E.O. Wilson, and that's a really great book for anyone who's young and really interested in starting a career or starting studies in science. And yeah, it's definitely a good collection of words of wisdom and some advice in terms of kind of what a scientist is and what that looks like. I also have a podcast actually, which it's not a book, but it's I think that still counts. Okay, so it's called Handpicked, and it's a podcast by the Laurier Center for Sustainable Food Systems, and it's a really awesome podcast series. And it's also scientists that I collaborate with who are part of the podcast, and also you'll probably recognize there's a lot of people from the Northwest Territories that are also a part of that those interviews. So it's a really good balance of science as well as community perspectives in terms of what do sustainable food systems look like, and especially in the context of the Northwest Territories, and looking at food and relationships between the food and environment. So that's a really great podcast that I would recommend. And then actually for a children's book, which is really fun, my favorite type, I love picture books, is A Walk on the Tundra by Rebecca Haynew. So that's a really amazing book that describes plants and certain uses traditional uses for plants in the Arctic and the Northwest Territories. So yeah, that's also a really cute book. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. Happy National Science Literacy Week.